Hi there and welcome to our first talk on information systems in organisations. And in this short talk I want to spend some time looking at 5 or 6 key areas of this subject. Firstly, I want to talk a little bit about the significance of information to organisations. I then want to talk a little bit about just what we mean by data and information, and introduce you to some of the different categories of data that are around in business today. I then want to move on a little bit and talk about the value of information, and then the characteristics of what we might call quality information, information that can be relied upon and used by businesses. And then finally, I want to bring you up to speed a little bit with the latest ideas around information, and suggest to you that information is in fact coming very, very fast and furiously at organisations today, and introduce you to the idea of volume, variety and velocity. So we'll start off with the first of those areas, the significance of information. Okay, well, thinking a little bit about the significance of information, I'm sure you're all aware of just how much and how important information is today. Information and data is captured from us, isn't it, in almost every aspect of our lives. We look at the web when we do online shopping. We can find so much information about a product or information about a particular service that we want. Organisations today use information absolutely dramatically in order to make their businesses work. So information is one of an organisation's most valuable resources. Often confused, however, with the term data. And what I want to do today is to look a little bit at the differences between information and data. Well, what we can say first of all is that information is created from data. So data is processed by a computer system, and in processing data we can then create what we call information. A good example perhaps of this is a spreadsheet. You're all familiar with an Excel spreadsheet or a similar package. If you type a number into a spreadsheet column or row, or a cell in a spreadsheet, then if we put the number 10 in, that is data. But if we then apply a formula to that particular cell, process it if you like, then we could use a formula to calculate maybe an exchange rate, or we could use it to calculate the amount of shares that could be bought for that particular value of 10. And if we then use that formula, we can make the data into information. Effectively, it's been processed in some way. Let's take a little look then at the various types of data that are out there being used by today's businesses. We're all familiar with what we call alphanumeric data, aren't we? Numbers, letters. The number 10 that I typed into our previous spreadsheet was a piece of alphanumeric data. Our names, our addresses, our phone numbers, our salary details, all pieces of alphanumeric data. But of course, in this world of what we call big data, there is in fact so many different forms of data out there now. There is audio data. The podcast or the videos contained in this set of courses is sound or speech data. There's image data, things like graphic images or pictures. That's considered to be data today. And there's also video data, moving images, images from cameras, CCTVs, images from our mobile phones and so on. But there's also things like location data, data from our GPS satellites, GPS data from our mobile phones, and also all of the data that you use in your everyday mobile phone calls, your Instagram messengers, your Facebook posts. All of this is different sorts of data that's out there. And if we add to that things like RFID data used for tracking or for card payments, then we've got an awful lot of data available out there to businesses. So if we move on a little bit now and look at the value of data, well, it doesn't take very much imagination to realise that this data has got a lot of value. And if we can process that data and do things to it, we can actually make it into very valuable information for today's organisations. And what we do know is that the valuable information about products, about processes, about all sorts of details can help people who work in business perform their tasks more efficiently and more effectively. But the other side of that is that we realise that if our data is inaccurate, then this can result in disastrous consequences for our business, its customers, and can reduce the performance of an organisation. So we need to make sure that the data that we've got is correct and that it's processed correctly to make good, valuable information for us to use. So what are then the characteristics of usable information? Well, I suppose overridingly, information has to be fit for the purpose for which you need it. And there's a number of characteristics that purposeful information has. Well, the first thing is it should be relevant. It should be up to date, shouldn't it? There's no point knowing information about products that we no longer stock. It needs to be relevant information. It needs to be current information. It needs to be adequate for the purpose. It needs to be timely, so it needs to be available when we need it. And it needs to be reliable. And so these are the sort of characteristics of usable information that businesses need to get right. And finally, thinking a little bit about the volume, the variety and the velocity of data today. Businesses are collecting and storing more and more data than ever before. But the problem isn't in collecting the data. The problem is actually in handling that data efficiently and usefully. It's not only the volume of data that's problematic for them, but it's also the speed at which they gather that data and also the variety, the wide different sorts of data that now becomes available for them. To summarise this short talk, it's put together and explained really well by one of our course textbooks, Business Intelligence Guidebook by Rick Sherman. And Rick Sherman says in summary, businesses are not yet as good at organising and understanding data as they have been at gathering it. Data has no value unless you can understand what you have, analyse it, and then act on the insights from the analysis. So really, our whole thoughts about information systems are we should see information systems as ways of gathering this data, storing it, processing it, and making it available for business users to do helpful things for their organisations. I hope you found this talk helpful, and I look forward to checking in with you later on in our studies together.